This land is your land. This land is my land.
We took on a very big topic for this discussion. The title of this discussion, this panel, is Can Democracy Transform the Social Crisis? In a time of social crisis that we are living through, poverty is on the rise, joblessness, hopelessness is on the rise, young people are having a terrible time finding their way into careers and into the mainstream. There's a huge housing problem, the education crisis, police-community relations, violence. We saw just a few examples of some of what we're dealing with here. Sometimes when that goes on, when those kinds of conditions go on, it can make people more conservative. And by conservative, I mean more frightened and more feeling that they have to hold on to what already exists because it's too risky to consider certain kinds of change, even though they also want change and they feel that change is so critical and needed that they're torn in some ways because the conditions of life can be so difficult. Are the difficulties that our communities and that the American people in different ways are facing, is that acting as a brake on certain kinds of political changes? If so, how do we break through that?
There's a dramatic shift that's taking place regardless of what we do as leaders. Right? We certainly see it in terms of the numbers of people that are registering as independents. That's having an effect. Yeah. In business, we're seeing a whole change that's taking place as well, and it's because there's now new technologies, new informations, new systems that people can operate. Organizations are now becoming flatter. You're starting to watch the rise of what now is called the exponential organizations that are being pushed and promoted oftentimes through crowdsourcing types of efforts. Steve Jobs said, I thought it was an interesting note, he said the reason that they win is because they put ideas over hierarchy. That seems to me to be exactly what has to happen in politics today. Mm-hmm. It's the idea that what we need is a system that promotes ideas instead of the existing system that we have that squelches it, that stops it. The existing system is built on hierarchy. It's built around power, and interest groups tend to have a disproportionate voice inside that system than people do.
Well, there's an African proverb that states, when the elephants fight, the grass suffers. And that's what's going on with the political climate here in America. You know, we need an independent elephant to step in the middle and say, you know what, we need to stop this bickering and get the job done. Right now, 88% of African-American males between ages of 16 and 19 are unemployed. And nobody wants to address that issue. I put that on my as part of my platform, okay? Another statistic out there. 85% of homicides that take place in Chicago take place in the African-American community. And don't get me wrong, I'm for everybody, but these are some issues we need to address. Nobody wants to talk about police brutality. I made that one of my platform issues as well, because what happens is some politicians, they take on those issues as if they're going to do something about it for real, and then it just drops all of a sudden once they get in office.
I'm from a small town in Pennsylvania. I grew up poor. My family's poor. The city's poor. And more poor people exist and are coming to be poor in this country. And so I think it's so critical for people, poor people, and people who are not poor, who care about poverty, to come together around the issue of strengthening our democracy. And to me, what that means, it has nothing whatsoever to do with who gets elected, because if people get elected in formations that have created the poverty, they don't care about it, they don't want anything basically to do about it. They don't even really talk about poverty in this country. And so I think that we have to continually deepen people's understanding about the relationship between these two. And I think the African American community has a particular role to play in this, because subjectively and otherwise, we've been taught that the reason why we're poor is because we're shiftless, not that we built this goddamn country and it never let us in. And I think there is no way to engage these issues unless we come together and not just go to the voting booth, but do what we're doing today and what people are doing, which is to create an environment where voting means something.
You know, the more I've been exposed to the political system, the more dysfunction has become clear. And coming from the background I come from, grassroots participation is what really makes the difference in my mind. The most toxic environment I can think of for politics is Washington, D.C., where there's very little flexibility. The system is structurally rewarding the wrong things right now. Prosperity is something everybody will say they want, and I actually believe them. But we have very different visions of what that is. We have the most expensive healthcare system in the world per capita, and we're not in the top 10 in outcomes, we're not in the top 20 in outcomes. How in the world did we achieve that? If we were, and if not just, first we have to do it ourselves, but if our leaders then, we model what we want to see.
I mean, it just speaks to the existing architecture of the system is designed to keep people out. It just is. It's designed in a way in which is exclusive. If you go to Arizona, independents now make up about 35%. They're the largest organized or unorganized group, however you would like to see it. They outnumber the Republicans and the Democrats. Yet, if you run for governor in Arizona as an independent, you need 6,000 signatures if you're a Democrat, you need 7,000 if you're a Republican, you need 39,000 if you're an independent. If you end up on the ballot, you're always last on the list. The others rotate, but the independents stay last. If you need a voter list, anybody who's ever run for office knows you have to have a voter list because you have to know how to communicate with voters. It's free if you're a Democrat, it's free if you're a Republican, it's a little over $100,000 if you want to run as an independent. And last, this is the one that's crazy, and to me, is that in 1994, we passed an effort that allowed independents, I was involved in an initiative back then, that allowed independents to vote in the two primaries. Now, the parties are trying to close those out, but one of the things that they've done is they've also said that we have an automatic early voting list. You automatically end up on the list if you voted on an early ballot the year before, unless you're an independent. And if you're an independent, you have to re-register every single time in the primary, meaning the rules are rigged. They're rigged to try to keep that group of people out. In fact, amongst Hispanics, 50% of Hispanics in Arizona are independent. It's the largest group. This is the largest voter suppression effort that we've seen in the country. If this had been happening in the South, it would have been in the numbers that were there. We would have seen it as such back in the 1960s. And instead, today, we ignore it. We're not paying attention to the fact that there are a large group of voices who today are being silenced because of the architecture of the system.
Yeah.
I mean, we have enough independence throughout America to make some major changes in a lot of states, but it's going to take a real leader, somebody in leadership from the independents to push that agenda. I'm talking about nonstop. The same way that people are organizing in Ferguson, Missouri, we need an independence organizing effort that's second to none to push the agenda of the independents, because the independents' voices need to be heard. But if we allow the status quo politicians to continue to just push their policies, we won't gain any traction. And that's what I would like to add.
I think what democracy is power for the people. And we have to take ourselves seriously as the people who have to produce that. And so many things, like the way in which poverty is understood and organized in America, keeps us apart. I've been speaking to a lot more white poor people over the past couple of years, and I say to them, you're poor. The thing that you have going for you is that the government says to you, but at least you're not black. But that doesn't feed your children. That doesn't deal with the crises in your homes as you work to try to come to terms with that. We have to do something about that. And what that means is that people have to come together and work in ways to transform this. And we have to have honest conversations about what's happening in this country and in our world. I spend hours teaching the Black and Latino community, individually and overall, that it is poor, and that poverty is not a personal position. It's come about as a result of our history in our nation and the abandonment by so many different institutions. The schools stink, like everything is a mess. And to the degree that we accept that and we can cross those lines that exist between us and, I don't know, white people and other people, which is what the independent movement, I think, has done so well. But it has to grow at the bottom around these issues also. I think we could transform America, and that's what we should be working on.
We live in increasingly self-segregated communities.
Yes.
You know, when I ask my progressive friends to have, co-host a conversation with someone with a different view, they say, well, I don't think I know any conservatives. I live in Berkeley. But, there's a lot.
So does my daughter. I mean, I love her.
But, that's a terrible thing to say, that we have had that much division. And we know that when people with like minds talk together about an issue, they get more radicalized with that view. And that's part of what's been happening to us. So we're living increasingly in separative narrative streams. We're sending up flags all the time. This is the tribe I'm in, and if you're not in that tribe, then you're kind of careful about what you say, and then you don't really get real till you're with. And this is a self-fulfilling prophecy as we find ourselves drifting apart. And my hope is that in independence, you have the desire to be part of the democracy and help heal it. You guys are in a wonderful position to say, yep, we're going to be part of this, and we're going to be a healing part of this conversation and democracy.
For you